Hi, welcome to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Thanks for joining the conversation. Hello, Senator Jones. Thanks so much for joining me on my podcast.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Oh, this will be short and sweet. Normally, I like to get into your background and just get all nosy. But there's so much to talk about in Florida, so it's kind of hard. But really quickly, I learned that you are like a scientist with a really intense biochemistry and biology background. How did you end up a senator?
People never know. People would never know that. Like my dad's a scientist.
Okay.
And so he went from being in science to, of course, in ministry. So I will always go to my dad for help with my science projects and things like that. He was just always very knowledgeable.
Yeah.
So science was just something that was always very interesting to me, and so much so that when I got to high school, I joined a club called HOSA, which was the Health Occupation Students of America.
Okay.
Because I wanted to go to med school. I wanted to be an OBGYN. That was my consistent, before I even knew what an OBGYN did, I wanted to be an OBGYN. So
yeah. The best acronyms, OBGYN, just sounds good.
It sounded so cool. I wanted to be, and then I found out that it's the obstetrician gynecologist, and I found out what they actually do. And listen, in middle school, in high school, you like, absolutely, that's exactly what I want to do. Then I got to college and took my first chemistry class. I said, I don't think I want to do any of this anymore.
Okay.
But I did. I actually enjoyed it so much that I started off as a biology major and went over to chemistry and majoring in biochemistry, molecular biology. Got accepted to med school. Did not go to med school because I took a year deferment off to be able to go to just take a break. And I started teaching, and I stayed there.
Yeah. And then, so what's the jump from education and science background to legislation?
So I was teaching a level 1 environmental science course recovery class. It was the same year that the end of course exam had just made its debut in Florida. And the legislature had just passed a law maybe the year before. I wasn't in the legislature then, but it caused some of my students not to be able to graduate. And they were very distraught about it. And when I asked who was the individual who changed the rules on these young people in the middle of them trying to graduate, my principal said the politicians did. And so I said, okay, I'm gonna run for office. So I did.
Oh, wow. All right. You gotta, be in the game to make the rules in order to help. Yeah. I love that.
He knows the rules, knows the game.
That's right. There it is. Okay. Well, as someone who's not in legislation and then had to be in legislation for these last 2 years and just kind of get this window, I can confidently say I will not be running for office ever. Kudos and gratitude to you and everyone who does this. Very challenging and wow. But I did see up close how difficult it is to get laws passed. I've been trying to explain to people, with my AAPI history bill, like, no, you don't understand, like, how hard it is to get a bill passed, how hard it is to get a bill like this passed in this environment, but also like less than 3%, I think, is what I calculated this year for, bills that get passed. And apparently that's normal. So it's hard anyway to get things done. And I was just curious for you in particular in Florida at this particular time, how challenging do you find it to work in an environment where you're a minority in so many ways? Democratic, African-American, LGBTQ, like there's just so many factors. Does that factor in, or is it just legislation is tough no matter what?
It doesn't. I operate outside of the box. I personally believe that when you operate under these restrictions that people's expectations, then it kind of restricts your mind to think like that. And then it also restricts you in moving in that way. And I like to move freely, and I've noticed that since I got into the legislature, it was difficult, but I realized that the only way to be able to get people to understand what and how you think on what makes us better people, what makes us a better state, is through relationship, right? Because I figure if the people who I serve with, if they understand my heart, if they understand my vision for where I think people and where I believe people can go, and merge that into becoming a shared vision, which I personally, that's how I move, then you can move legislation. And it's also some how you handle your colleagues in the time of with in the time of tough conversations, right? Which a lot of those happen in the legislature. How can you deal with these tough issues without losing yourself, right?
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
hard to balance that, especially in this climate that we're in now politically. I've seemed to figure it out. I seem to have figured it out. But it's hard trying to do that and try to pass legislation in both chambers and then get the governor to sign it.
Yes,
It is
yes.
hard.
It's a really crazy thing. And I really have a lot of respect for you because like I said, having now been to Tallahassee for these past 2 years and seen up close, like I think it would surprise people actually how across the aisle legislators do work and how friendly you are in the hallways and how well loved and liked everyone is, especially you. Like everyone loves you. I have to share this like quick story. It's like any time I'd gone to your office, it felt kind of like a party. Like it was the only office that was like laughing and then people were coming and going, like high-fiving. It was just like a constant flow of just colleagues and just people visiting your office. And it was just fun, right? And it just shows how, like you said, you may not agree, like this year, especially. You've
Yeah.
been very vocal about the governor running for president. And I personally agree with recent gun laws that's been passed, attacked on marginalized communities, the 6-week abortion ban, the list goes on and on and on. You still manage to work with fellow legislators. And that's where you're talking about operating outside of the box, right? Like it's like you don't look at all the things you don't agree with and you're like focusing on the one issue you're working on. Can you kind of share a little just so I can learn from my selfish needs, like how do you compartmentalize so well? Because like I
Mhm.
said, it's a party in your office, everyone loves you like legitimately, whether they're a Republican or a Democrat. I've seen various people coming and going, and just kind of that Tallahassee vibe was a lot different, I think, than I expected. I thought everyone's like across the hall from one another and just glaring at each other like, oh, you. But it's a very different thing, I think, if you're not there to really experience it.
Yeah, so Mimi, my thought process is this, that this role is temporary, right? And some people, they come in and they think that that this defines them, that them being elected is the definition of who they are, and it's not. It's just a part of who you are. And I still look at people as human beings. I don't look at people as especially my colleagues. I don't look at them as bad people, because the moment you look at people as bad people, you can't help them, and you can't learn from each other, nor can you work with each other, because there's always going to be some type of um edge that you have on these individuals. And so I move like that. Some people don't like how I do my politics, which is fine. Everyone get the opportunity to do their politics like they want to. I choose to I choose to do my politics in a way to where I know what my district needs. I know what the most marginalized of people need, and I ask myself, how can I do this in a legislature like I'm in now and still get the job done? And that's how I move. I, Compartmentalizing, it's something that I internally have to do when I know for a fact there are people who are legislating based off of my interest and who I am as an individual, Black, LGBTQ, and I recognize how and what these individuals and how they move. I don't hold it against them in that regard, but I hold them accountable to in my debate and in my questioning. So I'm not throwing them under the bus. I'm not calling them out of their names. I'm just holding them accountable on the policy. And I think that's how I've been able to kind of to build the bridge and build relationships with people, has just been just that. I still treat you as a human being, but I'm gonna call you out on your BS.
Yeah. Like I said, these last 2 years has been just eye-opening for me. And I don't know if you realize this, but the first time I ever was at Tallahassee, it was actually in one of your hearings because it was my hearing for the AAPI history bill, and
Mhm.
that was the anti-CRT bill. And it
Yeah.
was about an hour and 17, 18 minutes of that, and we had like less than 5 minutes to present ours. But I was so impressed with how impassioned you stood up for, even when knowing like this vote's going to go a certain way, but like making sure that you were so clear on what you were standing up for. And then, like I said, what's interesting was to see like the dynamic in the room and then outside of the room. It's just a different thing. And I think I kind of am looking at it now. I'm a martial artist, so it's like when you go in and you're sparring and you're like, all
Yeah.
right, it's on. We're not
I
friends in the
know.
ring. And like, it's on, we're fighting. And then outside the ring, you hug and you're like, yeah, good fight. Da, 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 da. Like, is it kind of like that? It's like you guys get your gloves on, you go. And then outside of it, you're just like, okay, and you want to have tea later? Okay, cool.
Yeah, no, and it is like that. I mean, it is. It is because I know for a fact, for me, when I know one of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle has a bad bill that's coming up in committee, and I'll be very frank, I'm like, I'm on your ass today. I tell them,
I love it.
I tell
I
them
love
quick.
it.
I would tell them quick. I'm about to be on your ass today. Question, debate, everything, and they respect it because I'm not
Yeah.
disrespectful to my colleagues, right?
Yeah, no.
I'm not disrespectful to him at all. My partner Matthew and I, he and I always talk about this, and that is how can you still remain respected by being respectful to
Yeah.
people. And that's just how I move. Now listen, it changes, and you, some people probably they saw it this past session that no, I will get dirty with you if you're disrespectful to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I will always come with you in grace, right?
Yeah.
Until I feel as if you're being snarty, if I feel that you're being very quaint, or if you're being disrespectful, I'll call you out on it
Yeah.
and be very frank with you. Listen, talk to me like you want to be respect me like you want to be respected. Talk to me like you want to be spoken to, and then we can get the job done. We can disagree, but you're gonna have to be rude.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally get that. And like I said, just bravo. It's like watching the opera because I'm like, wow, this is fascinating. Like it's just so intense. Now, if you don't in mind indulging me,
Please.
I'm sharing my experiences here, and like I said, I have to have you back on because there's a lot of things I want to talk to you
Yeah,
about.
I'm
But
cool with that.
obviously I've been working on this AAPI history bill for the last 2 years, and it has been just a labor of love. I am a volunteer. Like I think people think this is my full-time job or that like I'm like in this environment where like I have a company or an organization. I'm like, we are literally like less than 10 volunteers and we're just like, let's do this. And it's been crazy. And a lot of people I think don't know. Like I started this last year. Senator Stewart and Representative Skamani sponsored the bill. It didn't go very well for us. And
Right.
then in all honesty, I got the advice from Rep. Skamani was like, hey, you know what? It's going to be a supermajority next year. It's going to be even more intense. You're going to have to work across the aisle. And I was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
oh, that's gonna be hard for me. Like
Yeah.
I am very much known in my community as an activist for a lot of very progressive um issues, and so that was really hard for me. So like just to hear and see the way in which you and so many of your other peers do it so naturally and well, it was just super impressive. But one of the things I think people outside of this state, for example, don't understand is how legislation works. Maybe very specific to Florida, maybe specific to government, I'm not sure. But I think their assumption is because our governor happens to be very much in the news,
Right.
national news, they
Definitely.
think that he has a play in every single bill that goes down the that is signed. Yes, he quote unquote signs the bills, right? But like even our bill signing was super deceiving because he signed 7 bills, which we were like an amendment on one. We weren't invited. It wasn't announced. Our bill number wasn't even announced that we were amended to. So it's like very deceiving to see a picture of him like signing the AAPI history bill where I mean, I don't want to go as far as saying like
Yeah.
he doesn't
Yeah.
know he signed the AAPI history bill, but I will say we worked really hard to get that thing saved and done. And I don't believe he was actually in the country at the time when we were doing that. I mean, you were there. We were running up and down the halls. We had that lovely moment in time, a pocket where we hung out in your office. It was like a party. You and I were making like plans to go hang out in Japan together. Like I was like thankful for that, because it was so stressful. It was like this most stressful day of my life. I felt like I was on a roller coaster of highs and lows. It was like, our bill died. Now it's okay. Now it's not okay. Now it's
Oh,
okay.
that's what it is.
Yes. And so like, if you could kind of give people a sense of like what it really is like to pass legislation, and that even so, the governor isn't necessarily like behind every bill, like people think and see, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I mean, the governor is, this governor has a strong hand on both chambers. Past governors did not have that much of a strong hand on both chambers. I mean, acknowledge that. The governor, I mean, while people might think that he put forth every bill, the governor does he does present his agenda to the Speaker of the House and to the Senate President. He then addresses the body to let people know what direction, I should say he or she, because you never know what can happen in the future. But each governor, they address the members in joint legislative session to talk about their agenda, and so you kind of know what direction the governor is going to go in. But 95% of the bills come from members and in agencies, and it comes from lobby corps, come from businesses, other interest groups, community members, where a lot of these other bills are formulated from. And once they come, they are then bill draft them. They are drafted into a committee. Then they are assigned to a drafted by a bill drafter, then sent to a committee that's assigned by the Speaker or the Senate President. And I tell people all the time, you need to make sure that you get your bill up either in committee week or within the first 3 weeks of session. Because that gives you the opportunity, as session or as subcommittees start coming to a close, you either A, have the ability to fast track your bill, B, amend your bill to someone else's bill, or B, count your losses. Like, if once the time frame come where you're like, you know what, I'm going to stop pushing this bill because I won't make it to the deadline. And you need to be working with the House at the same time. And so what I have done, because I know we are in a supermajority, and I'm very critical how my office and how we research bills. I look for a lot of bipartisan legislation. I'm not big on messaging bills like I used to do back in the days, because I think the needs in my district are way too great to play patty cake with these issues. And so I'm very intentional. And the last thing I'll make clear is, while you're working with the House, it probably behooves you to get a Republican to run the bill with you in the House, or get a Republican to co-sponsor it with you in your respected chamber.
Yeah. I mean, and it's funny because I'm of the age, rather, that Schoolhouse Rock was a thing, and I was like,
Yes,
that is a
both.
lie.
That's right. I'm an '80s baby.
Yeah, right. And so I was like, that is a lie, because I was in the legislature and my bill died, and then I had to like CPR it by running 20,000 steps that day, and then it was like finding a place and the right place. Like, we got so lucky finding the right place. But yeah, you make it sound very methodical, but it is chaos.
It's organized chaos.
It is organized chaos. Yeah, I mean, there's rules, and then everyone keeps saying to me, "There's rules, but there's not rules." And I'm like, "What does that mean?" And they're like, "Well, the committees have ended, but I was like, "Oh my gosh, you could get the Senate president to get you to the next committee, or you could get amended, and all these things." And we were so fortunate to be amended to what I believe to be one of the education bills that I was not like heartbroken that would be the one we're amended to, because there were so many things that came down the pipeline this year that I was so frustrated, and it was tough, honestly, to sit in the room and hear all these bills going before me that was like so controversial, so heartbreaking. But like, we got very, very lucky. Like, it was just the time. There's so many things. Lightning has to strike twice, both in the right place. That's how I've described it to people. And but I think it's kind of crazy, because now we are having this kind of controversial issue nationwide, right? Where literally people are are suspect, because how could I get this bill passed when AP African American studies are being taken away, or, you know, the Don't Say Gay bill expansion, all these things. But they also don't ever get to hear about some of the positive things that have happened, like
Yeah.
this, for example. And the fact that, you know, the K through 12 education has been kind of what it is, but also now, like, 551 went through, which is the reporting of African American history being taught, which joins Holocaust education that had a reporting requirement. I just learned that this year too. Like, there's so much we don't know as citizens,
Yes.
and then so you only hear the one thing and you can really be bogged down by it. I mean, are there other silver lining things that happened this session that we should know about? And in what way can, like, we, I guess, as citizens, just be a little bit more open to the truth of what's coming out of places like Florida? Because I have to say, I got laughed at when I told people I was working on an education bill in Florida from non-Floridians, like literally laughed at.
I know. I mean, yeah, I guess, and I'm not trying to be. I don't want to. I don't want to I don't want you to think I'm speaking in talking points when I say this. The
Yeah.
silver lining is individuals like yourself who understand this process, who are trying to learn this process, or who have been able to accomplish things in this process. And I think when more people understand that, you know what, this system can actually work for me if I work it right. I think that's the silver lining, but it's also encouraging people to understand that there is a silver lining in all of this if you get engaged, right? The only reason why we are in the predicament that we're in right now as a country, as a state, is because so many people think that the system doesn't work for them. And a lot of times it's because people don't know how to work the system.
Yeah.
And that discourages individuals. And Mimi, to veer off just a tad bit to kind of connect what I'm saying. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to go to one of the a HUD apartment complex in my district, and so I have like probably one of the most HUD apartment complexes that are saturated within my district, within the state of Florida. One of them I went to, and it reminded me why I do this work, right? And I look at the work that you all did, and I'm sure that this reminded you why you do this work and why you got involved with this work in the first place. And the silver lining, I will repeat, is the fact that there are individuals, there are people who are putting their hands to the plow. The silver lining is that the people are catching on that if I just get involved, then there could and there can be the change that I'm truly looking for. I know that sounds very cliche, but I'm actually being extremely direct and real when I say that. So one, I am so happy to be a supporter of the AAPI history bill. I don't care where you come from. I don't care who you are. We all have a responsibility to know each other's story, and we have a responsibility to know each other's history. I am so happy for those people who came and supported the AAPI history bill, because if you're going to talk about Jewish history, if you're going to talk about African American history, I think Asian American and Pacific Islander history is also important. And so if we're going to do that, we need to be collectively involved with making sure that every child, every parent, every teacher is well versed on what history is. And for individuals who might not agree with as the right history being taught, you are the outlier in all of this, what is happening right now. Right? I think people want to know what true history is. And because we want to know what true history is, I'm happy to be a supporter of AAPI, to continue to be a supporter of AAPI. And I can't wait to see it flourish and go through all 67 counties and be able to report back and what that looks like and what young people are learning.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Please subscribe and rate my podcast on your platform of choice and leave a review. You can become a patron of the show at patreon.com/SifuMimiChan to help keep this